It was a rainy autumn morning in a quiet neighborhood of Chicago. In an old apartment building on the third floor, a woman named Eleanor gazed out the window. Approaching her 80th birthday, her eyes still sparkled with the curiosity of a young girl. The gentle whistle of the kettle filled the kitchen when the doorbell rang. Standing outside was a tall young man carrying a large box. His name was Jake, and he was 28. Every day, he knocked on dozens of doors, trying to make a living. When Eleanor opened the door, their eyes met. Jake's warm smile stirred something in Eleanor's heart that she hadn't felt in a long time. "Hello, dear," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "I have a delivery for you, ma'am," Jake replied. "But I must say, your home looks very peaceful." It was a simple statement, but it touched Eleanor's heart like a soft caress. It had been ages since someone had remarked on the tranquility of her home. After accepting the box, Jake prepared to leave, but Eleanor found herself saying, "Would you like to stay for some tea, dear?" "I would love to, but I'm short on time." "Though, I could manage a quick cup," he said, a shy smile lighting up his face. They settled in the kitchen, where two slender glasses fogged up on an old lace tablecloth. As Eleanor looked into Jake's eyes, memories of her youth flooded back. Jake, on the other hand, found himself captivated by the delicate hands of the older woman. Though they had both carried the burdens of life, her hands still looked fragile, and the aroma of tea created an invisible bridge between them. Without realizing it, Jake began to talk at length about his life, his fatigue, and his dreams. Eleanor simply listened, feeling a vibrancy in her home that she hadn't experienced in years. Time slipped away like water through fingers. When Jake glanced at his watch, he realized he was late. He hurried to stand but paused before leaving. "Ma'am, I found peace here with you," he said softly. A faint blush crept onto Eleanor's cheeks. Her heart raced like that of a young girl. After he left, a deep silence enveloped the apartment. Yet, within Eleanor's spirit, a new story began to take root. She sensed that her life was about to change, and the next morning, the doorbell rang again. Jake had returned without a reason, just to see her, just for another cup of tea. Their story began like this, with a cup of tea, a warm glance, and the delicate bond woven by fate between two lonely souls. That morning, Jake had woken up early, a strange excitement mixed with peace swirling inside him. He usually didn't visit the same customer 2 days in a row, but Eleanor's tea, the scent of her kitchen, and the warmth within her silence lingered in his mind. He needed an excuse. He thought of stopping by the market to pick up something small, maybe a treat, just to ensure that door would open again. As he stood in front of the street door, he took a deep breath. In his hands was a small cake box, topped with a cheap card that read "Thank you." He rang the bell. When Eleanor opened the door, her eyes widened in surprise, but her face broke into a smile. "Jake, my dear. What a lovely surprise. I wanted to thank you for the tea yesterday. Yours is the best." Eleanor felt a rush of warmth at being called ma'am, but it also brought a slight ache to her heart. She didn't quite understand why. Perhaps it was the word that made her feel older than she was. They stepped inside. Jake opened the cake box and cut it into 2 slices. This time, there was not just tea but also coffee. Eleanor poured the coffee into her silver-rimmed antique cups, the rich aroma filling the air as they settled back into their comfortable routine. The clock on the wall ticked steadily, filling the cozy kitchen with its rhythmic sound. "I haven't shared coffee with someone like this in ages," Eleanor said, breaking the comfortable silence that had settled between them. Jake, seated across from her, smiled warmly, his eyes reflecting a sense of ease that had grown between them. As they sipped their drinks, Jake began to share stories from his childhood. He spoke of losing his father at a young age, of his mother working long hours at the local market to make ends meet. Eleanor listened intently, her gaze drifting as she absorbed his words. In Jake's stories, she saw echoes of her own life, memories of her son who had moved overseas years ago, never to return, leaving behind only silence. Sometimes, Jake said softly, you meet someone for just 5 minutes, but they stay with you forever. Eleanor's heart tightened at his words. There was a depth to them, a silent understanding that resonated with her own experiences. From that day forward, Jake began to visit every morning. Sometimes he would come up with excuses, I have a package for you, or the company is running a new promotion. But Eleanor knew the truth, she could feel it in her bones. His presence filled the quiet corners of her home, melting away the loneliness that had settled in her heart. One day, gathering his courage, Jake asked, have you ever been in love? Eleanor hesitated, unsure of how to respond. She had loved deeply in her youth, but life had taken her on a different path. I did, she finally admitted. But that was a long time ago. Love feels different now. It used to be quiet, something you waited for, something you cherished. Now, everyone talks, but no one feels. Jake looked at her thoughtfully. But you still feel it, he said, his gaze penetrating. Your eyes tell a different story. Eleanor felt a blush creep up her cheeks as she turned her head away, but Jake reached out, gently taking her hand in his. It was a fleeting moment, yet it felt like a connection that spanned time, holding the past, present, and perhaps even the future. The next day, when Jake arrived, Eleanor had gathered her hair into a neat bun and donned an elegant, albeit vintage, dress. Soft music played in the background, and a delicate scent of her favorite perfume lingered in the air. Everything felt different, charged with a new energy. That day, they shared a meal together for the first time, lentil soup, rice, and yogurt. For Jake, it was a feast, a celebration of their growing bond. Afterward, Eleanor pulled out old photo albums, showing him a black and white picture of herself as a young woman, her eyes distant yet hopeful. Jake studied the photograph, his heart racing. The woman in this picture is sitting right in front of me, but my heart beats differently when I look at her, he said, a hint of admiration in his voice. Eleanor smiled softly, but a shadow crossed her face. That woman has aged, she replied, a touch of sadness in her tone. Jake shook his head. Age doesn't define the heart, Eleanor. That night, as Eleanor climbed into bed, her heart raced with a mix of excitement and guilt. She caught herself wondering if it was appropriate to feel this way at her age. But when she looked in the mirror, she saw a woman whose cheeks were flushed with life, a sight she hadn't seen in years. The next morning, however, the doorbell didn't ring. Jake didn't come. Eleanor waited all day, glancing at the clock, peering out the window, hoping to see him. As night fell, she checked her phone, realizing she didn't even have his number because she had never thought to ask. Days passed, each one stretching longer than the last. By the third day, when the doorbell finally rang, Eleanor rushed to answer it, only to find a stranger standing there. Disappointment washed over her. The fourth day turned into the fifth, and just as she began to accept that their story might have come to an end, the doorbell rang again. Jake stood on her doorstep, looking weary but filled with something more. I'm so sorry, he said, his voice heavy with regret. My mother fell ill, and I had to go back to the countryside. Eleanor's heart ached at the sight of him. She could see the strain in his eyes, but she also felt the warmth of his presence. I was worried, she admitted softly, her gaze dropping to the floor. I thought of you every day, he replied, stepping inside. He held out a small pouch, and from it, he pulled out an old-fashioned handkerchief, embroidered with the letter E. My grandmother used to say, if you can make a woman happy, that's all that matters. Eleanor took the handkerchief, her heart fluttering at the gesture. In that moment, the silence between them spoke volumes, weaving a new chapter in their unfolding story. The evening passed in a comfortable silence, punctuated only by the clinking of teacups and the warmth of shared glances. As the night drew to a close, Mark stood at the door, a hint of uncertainty in his voice. "Should I come by again tomorrow?" Emily paused, her heart racing at the thought. She nodded slightly, a smile breaking through her initial hesitation. "Yes, Mark. But this time, no excuses." The next morning, at 9 o'clock, Emily entered her kitchen, feeling a peculiar energy in the air. She opened the curtains wide, letting the sunlight pour in, illuminating the space with a golden glow. She set the table, brewed a fresh pot of tea, and arranged the delicate china cups, each movement filled with anticipation. Yet, as the hours ticked by, her excitement morphed into anxiety. 10 o'clock came and went, then 11, and still no sign of Mark. A small knot of worry tightened in her chest. Had something happened to him? Was his visit merely a fleeting whim? Just as doubt began to settle in, the doorbell rang. Emily rushed to answer it, her heart leaping as she opened the door to find Mark standing there, a sheepish smile on his face and a small bag in his hands. "I'm sorry for being late." "I have no excuse this time," he said, stepping inside. As their eyes met, the familiar warmth enveloped them both. This time, Mark seemed to have come not just for tea but to stay a while. They spent the day engrossed in books, sharing stories of old films, and laughing over memories. Emily spoke of classic cinema, her voice animated as she recounted tales from movies she had watched years ago. Mark listened intently, his admiration for her growing with every word. In that moment, the youthful spirit within Emily stirred to life, ignited by Mark's presence. Yet, alongside her excitement, a twinge of fear crept in. What would the neighbors think? What would her family say if they knew? Sometimes, even she found herself gazing into the mirror, questioning her choices. As the evening approached and Mark prepared to leave, he paused at the door. "Emily, I need to ask you something." She looked away, feeling a rush of vulnerability. "Ask me." "I find myself thinking about you more each day." "Do you feel at peace when you're with me?" he asked, his voice steady yet soft. I don't know, Mark. What is right? What is wrong? I don't even know what to call what we have," he admitted, stepping closer. "But I've already named it." Emily blinked, surprised by his boldness. "What do you mean?" "That word echoes in my mind," he said, his gaze unwavering. Tears welled in Emily's eyes. "At this age? Really?" "Age doesn't count in matters of the heart," he replied gently. "With you, I feel like I belong somewhere." "That's real." She turned her head, fighting back tears, but Mark took her hand, his touch grounding her. Then, slowly, he leaned in and pressed a soft kiss on her forehead, gentle, sincere, a moment that transcended words. That night, Emily lay awake, her heart racing. She looked in the mirror, brushed her hair, and recalled the youthful days when she had waited for someone special by the window. But that person had left. Mark felt different. The following day, he returned, this time with 2 tickets in hand. "How about we go to the theater?" he suggested, a playful glint in his eyes. Emily was taken aback, she hadn't been out like this in years. Yet, Mark's enthusiasm was infectious, and she couldn't say no. That evening, they found themselves in a small cultural center, watching an old love story unfold on stage. As they sat side by side, Mark's hand found its way over hers. For a moment, Emily hesitated, but then she let it stay. In the dim light of the theater, 2 lonely souls connected, their fingers intertwined. The days that followed grew even more intense. Emily began cooking meals for Mark, while he brought groceries and helped organize her home. One afternoon, while rummaging through a closet, they discovered an old music box. As they opened it, a sweet melody filled the room. Mark extended his hand to her, inviting her to dance. Emily hesitated, a hint of doubt creeping in. "I can barely stand any more," she said, a nervous laugh escaping her lips. "I'll hold you," Mark assured her, his voice warm and inviting. They danced slowly in the small room, the music wrapping around them like a soft embrace. Their steps were unsteady, but the feelings they shared were profound. Meanwhile, the neighbors began to notice. Who was this young man? Why did he visit every day? Whispers began to circulate, curiosity piqued. One day, as Emily was tending to her garden, she overheard snippets of conversation. "Have you seen her? That older woman with the young man?" Emily felt a mix of embarrassment and defiance. She had never cared much for gossip, but the scrutiny felt different now. She glanced at Mark, who was helping her with the flowers, and felt a surge of determination. Whatever the world thought, she knew what she felt. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm glow over the neighborhood, Emily realized that her heart was no longer just a vessel of memories, it was alive with hope and new beginnings. Emily stepped out of her house one sunny afternoon, her heart light with the joy of the past few weeks. As she made her way to the community garden, she encountered Mrs. Thompson, an elderly neighbor known for her sharp tongue and even sharper gaze. "Who is that young man you've been spending time with?" Mrs. Thompson asked, her tone laced with suspicion. "Is he your grandson?" Emily paused, her mind racing. For the first time, she felt a surge of confidence. "No, he's not my grandson. He's the surprise of my life," she replied, a smile breaking through her initial hesitation. When she returned home, her hands trembled slightly, a mix of excitement and nerves. She couldn't wait to tell Mark about the encounter. Later that evening, as they sat on her porch sipping iced tea, she shared the story. Mark's expression shifted from curiosity to annoyance. "People talk because their lives are dull," he said, his voice firm yet gentle. "What we have is real." That day, they made a pact, no more hiding. Mark began to tell his friends about Emily, some were surprised, others teased him, but he remained unfazed. "My happiness doesn't fit into anyone's mold," he declared, and Emily felt a change within herself. She started wearing brighter lipstick, experimenting with her hair, and even brought home fresh flowers to brighten her living space. One afternoon, they took a selfie together, their smiles wide and genuine. Emily printed it out and placed it on her bedside table, a reminder of their growing bond. As they sat on the balcony one evening, the sun setting in a blaze of orange and pink, Mark turned to her, his eyes serious. "Do you love me?" he asked, his voice steady but vulnerable. Emily looked away, lost in thought. "Love at this age feels different," she admitted softly. "But yes, it exists, and yes, I love you." Mark's eyes glistened with unshed tears. "If my mom knew, she would be so happy," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Does she know?" "She knows and respects you more than you realize," Emily reassured him. That night marked a new chapter. For the first time, Mark stayed over. They sat together on the couch, a blanket draped over them. The silence was comfortable, filled with unspoken words. Later, when Emily woke to get a glass of water, she glanced at him. He looked peaceful, like a young boy lost in a dream. She adjusted the blanket around him and leaned down, pressing a gentle kiss on his forehead. In that moment, she whispered to herself, "If this is life's final gift to me, I accept it." The next morning, they shared breakfast, laughter mingling with the aroma of freshly brewed coffee. But as summer began to fade, a shadow loomed on the horizon, one that neither of them could foresee. As the first cool breeze of autumn swept through the neighborhood, Emily felt a lingering warmth in her heart, a flower that had yet to wilt. Each day with Mark felt like a miracle, quiet, elegant, and profound. They had settled into a rhythm, with Mark sometimes taking time off work to spend with her, his presence brightening her days. Emily found herself enjoying her reflection in the mirror again, pinning her hair back with colorful clips, and waking up early to embrace the day. Music filled her home, and the scent of coffee wafted through the air. Two people from different worlds shared the same table, breaking bread together. But life has a way of testing even the happiest moments. One morning, Mark didn't show up. Noon came and went, and still, there was no sign of him. As dusk fell, Emily waited, her heart heavy with worry. She stared out the window, feeling like a forgotten figure in her own life. The next morning brought no relief, he was still absent. With no phone number and no address, she felt the weight of uncertainty. Their love had been so pure, so honest, that they hadn't felt the need for such things. By the third day, anxiety gnawed at her. Her knees ached, and her heart felt tight. It wasn't just the waiting that hurt, it was the nagging feeling that something was wrong. On the fourth day, a knock echoed through her quiet home. Emily opened the door to find a young woman wearing a headscarf, holding a small note. "Excuse me, are you Emily?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. "Yes, I am," Emily replied, her heart racing. "I'm Mark's cousin. I have a note for you." Emily's hand shook as she took the envelope and opened it. Mark's handwriting filled the page. "Emily, as I write this, words are choking me. I have something I didn't tell you. My mom has fallen ill again, and this time it's serious. I need to go to my aunt's village. My phone won't work there. I may not be able to see you for a while. But know that." The note trailed off, leaving Emily with a sense of dread and longing. Emily woke up every morning thinking of Mark. If this letter reached her, it meant he still held a place in his heart for her. "Hold on, because I will return. I love you." The note slipped from her fingers, and she sank into the chair, feeling a weight in her chest that threatened to crush her spirit. Days turned into weeks, and still, Mark did not return. 1 week, 2 weeks, then months passed. Emily often found herself gazing out the window, watching the world go by. Neighbors began to whisper. "Where did that young man go? How long can that old woman hold on?" But Emily remained silent, for hope resides in the heart, and love knows how to wait. That winter was harsh. Emily fell ill, and when the doctor came to visit, he assumed she was alone, unaware that her heart still belonged to Mark. One night, as her fever spiked, she dreamt of him. Mark was there, holding her hand. "You promised you'd come back," she whispered. "I have returned," he replied. "Is this real?" "You're in my heart, and that's enough." When she awoke, tears streamed down her cheeks. At the end of her blanket lay a handkerchief, delicately embroidered, a keepsake from Mark's mother that she still cherished. Days turned into weeks again, and then one spring morning, there was a knock at the door. Emily struggled to her feet, using her cane for support as she opened the door. There stood Mark, but he looked different. His eyes were weary, his hair unkempt, and a beard had grown on his face. Yet his smile remained unchanged. "How long has it been?" Emily asked, her voice trembling. 12 months, Mark replied, lowering his head. "But not a single day passed without me thinking of you. My mother passed away, I waited until her funeral was over before I came back." Emily's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't let them fall. Instead, she stepped forward and took Mark's hand. "Welcome home," she said softly. "I'm back," he replied. From that day on, everything changed. Mark stayed by Emily's side. He helped her with shopping, cooked meals, and brewed tea. Together, they began to weave their lives anew. One summer morning, as they strolled along the beach, Mark paused and reached into his pocket. He pulled out a small box, opening it to reveal a single ring. "Will you marry me?" Emily's eyes widened in surprise. "Mark, I'm 80 years old, and I love you. Your age doesn't matter to me." Let them laugh. What have I not lived for until now? Love. That day, Emily accepted. They held a quiet wedding ceremony with just a few friends and neighbors. The small living room was filled with flowers, and Emily wore a white dress, looking every bit the bride. Mark held her hand, his eyes glistening with tears as they signed the marriage certificate. "Even now, my heart still beats your name," Emily whispered. "And mine beats for you," he replied. As years passed, Emily's health began to decline. She struggled to walk, and her sleep grew shorter. Yet every morning, Mark sat at the edge of her bed, holding her hand and gazing at her with love. One day, Emily rested her head on Mark's shoulder. "This life gave me you. I want nothing more." When autumn arrived, Emily closed her eyes one morning, never to open them again, her hands cradled in Mark's. Her funeral was simple. Mark stood alone at her grave, but then he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out that old handkerchief. He placed it gently on Emily's grave, the letter E still visible on its fabric. Years later, in a park, an elderly man sat on a bench, sipping tea from an empty cup beside him. A curious child approached and asked, "Sir, why do you have an empty cup?" "For the lady beside me. She loved tea more than anyone." And that was their story. The age difference, the passage of time, society's judgments, none of it mattered. Because love was the meeting of two souls, and those two souls were forever united in a glance, a touch, and the warmth of a shared cup of tea. Subscribe to the channel,